Welcome to Auntie Mel Mel Life Unfiltered, the podcast where we say the things everyone else whispers, feels, or pretends they're totally fine about. Around here, nothing is too awkward, too messy, or too, oh my god, did she really just say that? Yes, I did. This is your space where real talk, real stories, real emotions, and the kind of honesty that makes you laugh, cry, and heal a little. Sometimes all at once. So grab your drink, get comfy, and let's dive in. Because life's too short to sugarcoat it, and I'm not here to do that anyway. Welcome to Auntie Mel Mel Life Unfiltered. Let's get into it. Hey friends, welcome back to Auntie Mel Mel Life Unfiltered, the space where we talk about real life, real healing, and the stuff we don't always know how to put into words. Today's episode is a really important one. We're talking about EMDR therapy and what it is, how it works, and why it's been life-changing for so many people navigating trauma, anxiety, grief, and overwhelming life moments. I'm joined by Laura, who is here to break this down in a way that's human, accessible, and not clinical or scary. If you've ever felt stuck, like you know something happened but your body hasn't caught up yet, this conversation is for you. As always, this is a safe, judgment-free space. You don't have to be ready to heal, just open to learning. Let's get into it. Welcome, Laura. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get into what EMDR therapy is, do you want to share a little bit about who Laura is and what your day-to-day looks like?
Well, I am a marriage and family therapist. I'm actually dually licensed. I have both a general counseling license and my marriage and family therapy license. And I own a private practice out in Wakeman, where I serve primarily children ages fives and up, individuals, families, couples. And one of the treatment modalities that I do use is EMDR.
Awesome. Yes. A little bit about your personal life. Do you have any animals or anything?
I do. I actually have a therapy cat that I bring in
Oh,
to
nice.
the office with me sometimes. His name is Bateson.
Aw.
He was a rescue. I found him under my father-in-law's porch when he was only 3 weeks old, and he had
Oh.
apparently, I'm not sure if he was abandoned by Mama or if Mama is no longer with us, but she hadn't been seen for a few days. So I had to bottle feed him. So he pops into the office with me every once in a while. And then we do have two other cats. They're all rescues
Mm-hmm.
that we've had, one named Winnie and then another one named Winter.
Aw,
And
awesome.
then we have three dogs. We have a terrier mix Roman, and then we have a I'm sorry, a German Shepherd mix named Dozer, and then we have
Aw.
an Aussie Doodle named Chief.
Lots of
So
energy there.
yeah, those are the fur babies, and then there's only one of our children still living at home with us. The other three are out growing, doing their own
Aw.
thing. So
Yes, almost empty nester syndrome, I'm sure.
almost,
Speaking up.
yep.
That's awesome. Yes, I'm a big cat lady. My cat's actually sitting on my desk with me. She's with me all day long. I work from home and she thinks she has to be with me anytime I'm on my computer. So she's
Gotcha.
kind of my
Yeah,
little
they have a
therapy cat, though. They really do heal us and help us. So
oh, yeah, I really think more people come to see him than me, honestly.
that's great. I love it. What led you to EMDR specifically?
Well, I have always worked with, clients on their trauma. And I can vividly remember when I was in grad school, I saw a video of somebody doing it. And it seemed really wild because they didn't do much about explaining, the background behind it and the research and the kind of the story of how EMDR was discovered. It just basically was this woman who was talking to this client, and then she would wave her finger in front of his face, and he was getting better. And so, that was pretty interesting. And so I kind of filed it away in the back of my mind for, hey, this might be something I want to look into.
Hmm.
So fast forward a few years and I'm working in a community mental health agency, and we just lots of trauma, lots and lots of trauma, not only from, things that you normally consider as traumatic, abuse of any kind, rape and, that kind of stuff. But we also saw a lot of trauma from like some systemic forces, poverty, being
Mhm.
exposed to violence out in the community, that kind of thing. And, I was really trying to find ways to help these people. So I had brought up to a supervisor, hey, I would like to go get trained in EMDR. Is this something that the agency would consider?
Mhm.
And she said no. She's like, it doesn't work.
Hmm.
Okay. So, okay, fine. So I kind of, again, filed it away at that point. And then I went into private practice and I really started to look more into EMDR, especially when I was hearing a lot of my clients ask me about it.
Mhm.
And that, hey, I'd heard about this. So I looked into it more and I decided, you know what? This is something I'm going to do. I want to be able to offer this service. So I went and did the training. And um, while we're doing the training, we have to practice on each other.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I chose something that I thought was fairly innocuous to try to reprocess, because I'm like,
Mhm.
I don't know any of these people here. Yeah, we're a bunch of therapists, but I don't know that I necessarily want to like cry in front of these people. I'm not going to open up all my traumas here. Well, let me tell you, the connections that I was able to make um, during just this quick demo session, they
Mhm.
made perfect sense, but I don't know that I ever would have put those together on my own,
Yeah.
and I'm a therapist. This is what I do for a living, right?
Yes.
So after that, I got hooked, and I actually, after I completed the first part of the training, went and sought out my own EMDR
Mhm.
therapist,
That's awesome.
um, to, continue the work that had kind of inadvertently been started,
Yeah.
during that training.
Yeah. That's great that, once you got out on your own, you looked into it more and are more open to trying new things, where you were before they just kind of dismissed it. Like everybody's evolving, things are changing. There's so much coming out that helps people in different ways. So I think it's important to continue to try different things. And as you said, your own experience brought out things that you never expected. So,
Sure, yeah. And
yeah.
that's actually, a bit of a neat part of the story of how EMDR was originally developed, because the woman who developed it, she was a research psychologist by the name of Dr. Francine Shapiro. She developed the protocol and, sent it out into the world, for people to use. And
Hmm.
at first, everybody was like, "Oh, yeah, this is great." But then a lot of people started coming back and saying exactly what that therapist, or rather that supervisor, had told me all those years ago. This doesn't work. You know, so she's like, but I know it does. Okay. So
Yeah.
she actually ended up hiring an independent firm to take a look at what was going on. Why
Mm.
were there these two stories that, seemingly were not jiving? And what they actually found was that it wasn't that the model of EMDR didn't work. It was what they call model drift, meaning
Okay.
that people were getting away from doing things in the order in which they're supposed to be done and using the language that they had found to be most effective.
Mm.
So she actually had gone on to develop, scripts to go along with the protocols to help kind of keep
Hmm.
therapists on track.
No, yeah, that's very smart. Yeah, if you're not doing it the correct way, then obviously you're not going to have the best results on that. So that's great that,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. For someone who's never heard of it, what is in real life terms EMDR?
Well, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Mhm.
So it is, as I said, a treatment for trauma. And, we have what we call the big T traumas, which are what you would think of, when you think of a trauma. But
Mhm.
then there's also like the small T traumas, things like being pulled up in front of the class in the fourth grade and humiliated because you had an accident, you know,
Mhm.
those kind of things, or like some of the more emotional or attachment based traumas. Okay. And one of my favorite things to tell people is we don't trauma rank here. It just because somebody had this going on doesn't make what you had going on any less real.
Yes, that's so
Okay.
important.
So the original way of doing EMDR was by using eye movements, hence where the name came from.
Mhm.
But it was later on expanded to include any kind of what we refer to as a bilateral stimulation or a dual action stimulus. Basically, a left right movement. Um,
Okay.
could be, following the therapist's finger with your eyes, like I said, which was the original. It could be patting, on your legs or on your shoulders, anything like that. It could be holding. I have these things that are called tappers that you hold in your hands and they vibrate back and forth. Some people have a light bar that's basically like a long light that the light moves back and
Mhm.
forth on it. Um, I have headphones that people can use to listen to tones, so there's all different forms of bilateral stimulation that you can use. And the idea being that you will apply the bilateral stimulation while you are thinking about whatever your traumatic injury was.
Mhm.
And whatever comes up as you're doing this is your brain's way of trying to guide you to heal.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense.
And so you have to work through, there's 8 phases of EMDR. Okay. And so you have to work through the 8 different phases to get to a point to where what you experienced, still really sucks. It's never
Mhm.
going to be a happy, rainbows and unicorn thing that you had happen to you. But
Mhm.
the idea being that you get it so that it's not to the point to where it's dominating your life.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's not taking over. You're not seeing something that reminds you of it and getting emotionally or physically or mentally triggered.
Mhm.
It's something that if you end up thinking about it, it's not that immediate, like, kind of reaction,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
visceral shock, that kind of thing.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really awesome, and like you said, I think it's really neat that it kinda does focus on some of the lesser traumas, so some of the not it kinda pulls out those, little moments, like you said, that may trigger you, 25 years later down the road, you think of that moment and your blood pressure gets up but once you have the therapy, it can help you manage that better, think about it like, "Okay, yeah." So that's great, that's wonderful. How is EMDR different from traditional talk therapy?
Well, EMDR, like I said, first of all, I tell, and you'll have to excuse my language here, I tell all of my clients that EMDR is weird as hell.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can cuss here, no
It's
worries.
not, it is not like a therapy that, like you said, normal talk therapy.
Mhm,
Um, it is different in that it is helping to move your traumatic memories from the part of your brain that they're stored, which is like your limbic system, your feeling, survival, fight or flight part of your brain, into long-term storage.
mhm.
You know, kind of like in the movie Inside Out when they were
Okay,
sending the
yeah.
memories across, to into long-term storage.
Mhm,
That's your traumatic memories live in like that control center.
mhm,
Okay. And that is what makes them so impactful on your day-to-day life,
mhm,
because you are using the same part of your brain when you're thinking about these memories as like your emotions, and so your emotions are triggering these physiological responses in your
mhm.
body,
Yeah.
that's why people frequently have nightmares about their traumas. That's the
Mhm,
part of your brain where your dreams come from.
mm.
And in fact, that's one of the leading theories as to how EMDR works is that it mimics your REM sleep, but you're awake.
Oh, okay.
Um, that is why people have flashbacks,
Mhm,
is because that part of your brain, there's no sense of time in there, so it's like you're right back to when it happened, and that can occur on a continuum, of
mhm,
to the point to where you really feel like you are back there and you're reliving it, in present time. So that's what EMDR seeks to do, is to move those into that front part of your brain. Um, talk therapy wants to do that as well. What makes it different is the application of that dual action stimulus.
Mhm.
And that helps your brain to guide it in the right direction.
Okay. Yeah.
I compare EMDR to, the wound in your brain from your trauma is just like
Mhm.
any other part of your body. Like if you had a wound on your arm, right? Your body knows what to do to heal it. It's going to
Mhm.
send the blood there, make the scab, create new skin, maybe leave a scar, but it's going to do what it needs to do to heal it.
Mhm.
Okay? Your brain is no different. The problem is that sometimes, for a variety of reasons, the healing process doesn't go the way that it should. You know, maybe it was repeated traumas. Maybe you weren't given the support you needed after the trauma. Maybe it was something that really was, life or death for you, that
Mhm.
kind of thing. Million and one different reasons why it doesn't heal. Just the same as there's a million and one reasons why a wound on your arm couldn't heal. Maybe you
Yes.
knock the scab off. Maybe you continue to re injure it. Maybe you get an infection.
Mhm.
So EMDR in this case is more like the antibiotic and the bandage. Okay. It helps you heal, it
Mhm.
facilitates the healing. It does not do the healing for you. Okay. And I think that's one of the biggest differences between traditional talk therapy is you're applying, like I said, that dual action stimulus, and it is doing things in your brain to speed that process up.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I could see how, I like that you use the Inside Out movie, for example. That's
Mhm,
perfect for that. That kind of makes a lot of sense. Somebody that didn't understand it, that's a perfect way to show that. So it's kind of
mhm.
moving it from one part to the other. And as you said, it's more healing. It's not just putting it somewhere in it like another bucket. It's actually
Yes,
helping it heal.
yes.
So that's
And the
awesome.
idea
That's,
being
yeah.
too that it helps you to create new thoughts and new cognitions
Hmm.
and beliefs about what it
Yes.
is that happened, because very often when people have trauma, they tend to blame themselves.
Hmm.
They're really their self-concept and their core of who they are as a person can be disrupted,
Hmm.
and so EMDR not only seeks to move those memories, but it seeks to change some of the ways in which you are thinking about yourself, other people in the world.
Yes, absolutely. You kind of answered this a little bit ago or brought it up a little bit ago, but what would you say to somebody that says, "What I went through wasn't bad enough?"
Well, like I said, we don't trauma rank,
Yeah.
and I tell everybody, if you are not allowed to complain because there's somebody on this planet who has it worse than you, there is exactly one person who is allowed to complain on this earth, and that is whoever the poor soul is
Right.
who has it
Yeah.
the absolute worst.
Yeah.
So perspective is a good thing, you
Mhm.
know, but just because there are starving children out there does not make what you have going on any less real, you know?
Absolutely.
And those two things can exist at the same time. You can acknowledge that, you know what? I don't have it that bad,
Mhm.
but this was bad for me.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's something that I always try to say. People in my life, or I know we had spoke privately, narcissists, things like that. They tend
Mhm,
to use that a lot. Well,
mhm.
what do they have to complain about? I had it worse. I know some people very personal to me that are like that, and I've gotten better with them. And like, just because your experience was this way doesn't mean someone else's wasn't the worst that they've ever been through. So,
Yes.
yeah, we have
Mhm.
absolutely no idea what someone's going through, what it feels like for that person. So,
Yes.
absolutely. I think anybody should get help for whatever traumas they have, no matter how big or small they seem to them.
Yes. I would agree.
Yes, I'm sure. What does an EMDR session actually look like? There's 8 parts to it, correct? You go through
There
8
are,
different
yes.
sessions? Yes.
So the first phase is a history taking, so that's kind of just gathering background information,
Mhm.
taking a look at what are some of the things that you think you want to work on? What are, some of the things that you're hoping to get out of doing
Mhm.
EMDR? You know, identifying what are some specific memories. And, therapists will do that in a variety of different ways. I have this entire sheet that lists like all kinds of what we call our greatest hits
Mhm.
of negative cognitions, just ones that we tend to see over and over again, that come up with
Mhm.
people. Not an exhaustive list by any means, but
Right.
definitely just ones that tend to come up a lot. And so we'll
Mhm.
take a look at that list, and we will identify ones that, for whatever reason, stand out for you. Either
Mhm.
maybe like you see that and you read it and you're like, "Ooh," or it makes you feel some type of way, or that you're like, "Oh, I know I've said that to myself before," and then I'll take them, we pick out maybe like your top two, three, four, and we'll take them and then we'll do what we call a float back, which is just
Okay.
basically thinking back to your past. What is the first time you can remember thinking it, the worst time, and the most recent?
Mm.
Okay. And this is kind of giving us an idea as to exactly where we want to start. Like
Mhm.
what memories do we really want to start trying to kind of hone in on and focus on? Um, So once we get all of those figured out, then we move on to the second phase, which is called resourcing. And I often
Mm.
do phase one and two together,
Mhm.
especially as we're bringing up some of this stuff that was uncomfortable. The resources are things that we do and to help you just kind of bring you down, to get you out of that part of your brain that's like the high emotion
Mhm.
kind of thing, and to help get you into a more level, even state.
Mhm.
So we will work on doing some of those in session. Things like a light stream meditation I have where I kind of just talk people through like a light, helping your body to relax. I have, this exercise we call the container exercise, which is where you're putting things that are stressful or hurtful to you into a container, not to put away to never think about again,
Mhm.
but more to hold it for you.
Mhm.
I kinda give it like the analogy of a backpack full of rocks.
Okay,
We
yeah.
can take the rocks out and put it in this container, and you can go back and you can deal with them in the future.
Mhm. Right.
Um, and then a couple of other different ones too. I have like some different music with different frequencies that can help people relax. We can do some progressive muscle relaxation, deep breathing exercises, that sort of stuff. Your calm space, which is basically
Mhm.
like your happy spot. Mindfulness exercises, those sort of things. Just a whole bunch. I have a whole list of them that I like
Mhm.
to teach people. Just because most people have like usually like a one or two that are their favorites,
Yeah,
and different
absolutely.
for every person.
Yes.
So we'll go through and we make sure, that we're really prepared to get into doing EMDR. I want to make sure that we have the resources down, that,
Mhm.
you're at a point to where we can identify what we refer to as your window of tolerance, which is basically the degree of suckage that you can tolerate. Because
Mhm.
we don't want you too calm, but
Yeah.
I also don't want you so overwhelmed that you're gonna be dissociating and,
Mhm.
not able to participate in the session, okay? So once we've gotten there, then we decide, okay, we're gonna move on to phases 3 through 8, which are a lot of the active reprocessing phases,
Mhm.
okay? And so normally we will, if it's a reprocessing session, we'll come in and I will do a super brief check-in with you. Just how's your week gone or weeks or however long in between sessions, anything come up? Did we, anything pop up in your head that, any insights, anything like that?
Mhm.
And then we immediately jump into reprocessing, not because I don't want to hear about what's going on, but because I want to give you as much of the session as possible for reprocessing.
Mm, yeah.
Okay. So we'll go in and we'll get started. We identify the memory that we're going to be working on and the negative cognition. And then I ask you, well, what would you like to believe about yourself? And then I
Mhm.
ask you to rank, okay, how true is that positive belief right now? And I really emphasize for people it's gut level. because a lot of times, like, if your positive belief was it wasn't my fault, like, logically, a lot of people know that.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know it wasn't your fault. But the head and the heart are very often two different things. So
absolutely.
I really emphasize that gut level, how true is that? And I ask you to rank it from 1 to 7, 1 completely
Mhm.
false, 7 completely true. And then we move on and say, "Okay, what emotions do you feel?" Okay, and you'll tell me about those, and then I'll say, "Okay, well, let's now rank those emotions, from 0 being no disturbance or neutral to 10, which is the worst you can imagine." And then I ask about body sensations. What are you experiencing in your body right now? And then I say, okay, let's bring it all up together. The negative belief, the memory, the emotions, and the body sensation. And then I'll say, notice whatever you notice as I begin the stimulation. So then whatever form of the bilateral stimulation we're using, whether it's eye movements or the tappers or,
Mhm.
the tones or whatever, I will turn on or do the stimulation, and I'll let it go for a little bit. And I tell people, notice whatever you're noticing. Okay. And I would say probably about 90% of the people who it's their very first time doing EMDR will ask me, am I doing this right?
Yeah.
Okay. Because, you're sitting there and you've got these things, buzzing, or I'm moving my finger, or whatever. And you're just to allow your mind to kind of just free associate and to go. Right.
Mhm.
And I always say, as long as you are not actively pushing anything down
Mhm.
or actively trying to force anything up,
Mhm.
whatever, comes out of it is right.
Right.
You know, like, I had a client one time who we were doing some medical trauma. And, she had told me that she was thinking about past boyfriends. Right. And so first it's like, what does A have to do with B, right?
Mhm.
Well, I told her to go with that and just keep noticing it. And she did. And what ended up coming out was that these boyfriends were trying to push her to be more physical with
Mhm.
them than she was willing to. And so, because of her medical issues, she was worried about, her current boyfriend. And she
Mhm.
said, no, that's silly. We're not in high school. There's no reason for me to believe that he would have this same issue, you know?
Mhm.
But like I said, at first it was like,
Yeah.
what the heck? Um,
Yeah.
and so that's why I said, it's wild the way that it can really pull
Mhm.
in some just different things and different pieces
Right.
of it that you're connecting that
Mhm.
you maybe wouldn't have done on your own,
Right, yeah.
or that would have really taken a long time with traditional talk therapy
Mhm.
to do
Yeah.
so. Um, so we'll go through and we'll keep doing that. I'll have the bilateral stimulation go, notice whatever you're noticing, and then I'll stop what the stimulation, and I'll prompt you to take a deep breath, and then I'll say, okay, what are you noticing now?
Mhm.
And so they'll tell me. And again, whatever comes up, whether it be a body sensation, whether it be a a thought, a memory, not like a repressed memory, because we're not doing that, right?
Mhm.
It's more like a kind of a whoa, haven't thought about that for years type deal.
Right,
You
yeah.
know, um, I once had somebody who, like, very literally, we were in the middle of reprocessing, and they're like, I have to go to the bathroom. Like, they had to go and literally go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And, I had one person tell me that they felt like a piece of their collarbone was missing.
Oh, goodness.
You
Yeah, you
know?
never know what's gonna
Yeah,
bring up,
you
yeah.
never know, and I'm just like, "Okay, let's go with
Mhm.
it."
Yeah.
Somebody else had told me that they felt like their legs needed to move.
Yeah,
And so, like I said, it's really amazing the body and mind connection that can become
absolutely.
pretty evident with the MDR. So we'll be doing that for a while, and I usually try to stay out of the way as much as possible here. Like, I
Mhm.
wanna give your brain the room to do what it needs to do. So you'll tell me whatever it is you're noticing, and I'll say, okay, notice that, you know,
Mhm.
bilateral stimulation for a little bit. All right, what are you noticing now? Notice that. Okay.
Mhm.
And so every once in a while I might kind of check and say, "Hey, where are you at with your emotions?" 0
Mhm.
being no disturbance, 10 being the worst. And the idea being that we want it to be a 0. Okay. So if it gets to that 0, then I'll say, "Okay, that original positive belief we came up with, does that still fit, or is there another one that fits better?" Sometimes it changes, sometimes it doesn't.
Mhm.
Okay. And then I'll say, "Okay, how true is that positive statement?" And 1 being completely false, 7 being completely true. And so obviously, we want to get that as close to a 7 as possible. So once it's to a 7, you know, I'll say, "Okay, place that positive belief together with that original image." Okay. And then we'll do another couple rounds of the bilateral stimulation, very similar. What are you noticing? Okay, notice that. And then once that's done, I'll say, "Okay, now that that's been installed, that positive belief has been installed," which I don't care for that language just because it kind of implies that I'm doing like some kind of voodoo magic.
Right.
And I'm really not, but
Right.
that's the language that we were given. So now that it's been installed, what are you noticing as you scan your body? Okay. And hopefully at that point you are just calm, chill, cool, relaxed.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, then I'll say, "All right, then hold that clear body scan with the original image and that positive belief," and we'll do another round. And then after that, we do kind of like a conclusion or a closure phase where we're
Mhm.
talking about, okay, where do we go next? Sometimes we will move on to a phase 8,
Mhm.
which is what we call the future scenario.
Okay.
So it's the idea of what would be a time in the future where this positive belief will serve you well. Okay. So we might not always do that right away. Sometimes there's just not a logical connection to be made.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's like, "Hey, you know what? I think I want to combine this future scenario with this, and this memory. So let's reprocess those first."
Mhm.
You know, um, Sometimes we don't have time in that session to do it. So it's got to wait till the next session.
Right.
We'll kind of talk about it at that point. We'll also, if we are, at the end of the session, we will use some of those resources to, help, again, like I said, bring yourself down,
Mhm.
self
Yeah.
center. Reviewing the fact that you may do some additional reprocessing in between sessions.
Mhm.
Just because we stop it doesn't mean that your brain is going to shut off.
Yeah.
So I
Absolutely.
always encourage people, take note of any kind of, weird dreams you might be having, any thoughts, emotions, body sensations, anything like that.
Mhm.
Just kind of take note of that and make sure, you bring it into the next week and let me know.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for giving us such an in-depth explanation of how that works. And
sure.
it's so interesting. I really think it's a really awesome way to process things and bring things out. And like you said, it may sound really off the wall or random, but put it together and figure out where that's coming from. So,
And I
yes.
think one of the exciting things too is that we now have actual pictures of the brain. Like people have gone
Yes,
and taken before and after pictures, and you can see the changes in the brain from
that's
before and
amazing.
after EMDR. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
actually
really
really
cool.
cool with the
Yeah.
technology we have nowadays.
Yeah, that's really awesome to show the physical proof that it does work,
Yes.
back in, the 9 or the 20s or something that wasn't possible. So,
No.
nowadays that's really awesome that we do have the technology to put science with therapy and prove that things do work. So that's amazing.
Sure.
What is the biggest myth you hear about EMDR?
Well, one, that it doesn't work. you know,
Yes.
that's still kind of existing around now.
Yes.
Another thing is that people feel like it's hypnosis,
Yes. I had a feeling
and it
that's what
is
it was
not.
going to be.
I cannot make you believe anything that is not true.
Mhm.
Like if grandma dies, generally speaking, that's terrible.
Mhm.
Unless she was some kind of horrible person, you know.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, that's not going to be a good thing. So
Mhm.
I will never be able to make you believe that that's great.
Right. Yes.
I could maybe lead you to come to the conclusion that she's not in pain anymore. She's in heaven with grandpa. I have great memories. Those are things that maybe, yes, we can work
Yeah.
towards having you believe. But
Mhm.
one, I'm not making you do anything.
No.
And two, if it's not true, I'm not going to be able, like, I'm not implanting things in your
Yeah.
brain. That's why I don't like that
Yeah.
installation
Yeah.
phrasing. But
Yeah. You're like, "That's the right word, but I don't like to use that one."
yeah,
So
exactly.
I figured it would be people thinking that it's hypnosis, that that's what
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
do, so
It's a very common misconception, but no hypnosis there.
yes. For people that aren't local, say somebody that's out of the state or country, what do you suggest they look for in a therapist if they're wanting to try the EMDR?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, if you just get onto the computer and search,
Mhm.
EMDR therapist, a lot of times, like, therapists will let people know that they
Right.
offer that.
Okay, great.
So a lot of times in their bio, like if you're in the US Psychology Today or, any kind of website or anything like that, a lot of times people will in fact, um, advertise that this is a service that they offer. So it should be pretty easy. You can also look for people who have a certification in
Mhm.
EMDR through the EMDRIA or EMDRIA
Oh, okay.
website. They will list people that are certified on there. I will say I am not certified, mostly because I just simply have not had the time to get in the hours that are needed
Right.
to be able to do that and to pay for that supervision. And so I am considered fully EMDR trained, but I am
Mhm.
not certified.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and like I said, that's just it's on my to-do list.
Right. You're a busy
Someday.
lady, you have a lot of things, so that takes time and, like you said, money, and you
Yes.
already are teaching yourself and learning and applying it as you go, so when you are ready to be certified, I'm sure you'll be, ace it and be ready.
Yeah. So I mean, there's that piece of it as well. Being able to look on the internet.
Right.
Now I will say for people who are in the state of Ohio,
Mhm.
you don't necessarily have to be local.
Okay.
If you would have asked me pre-pandemic about doing EMDR online, I
Mhm.
would have said absolutely not.
Yeah.
I just, there is something to be said for being in the room with your
Mhm.
therapist and, the things that happen, in that
Right.
therapeutic process. COVID forced a lot of stuff. um,
Yeah.
and one of the things was I started doing EMDR online.
Mhm.
It can be successful.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a program that I use where I send you a link and you can follow the little ball on the screen, that goes back and forth, or it can,
Yeah,
do a
okay.
tone in your ears.
Mhm.
Um, and it can work. It really
Mhm.
can. Which I think was one of the good things about COVID. One of
Yeah.
the few good things,
Right.
was
Yes.
that it really, broadened our horizons with that.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
that is an option.
Okay.
Unfortunately, my license doesn't allow me to, do any kind of international or anybody outside of the state
Right.
of Ohio. Um,
Yeah.
but that is something else that could be, if you're in a more rural area or,
Mhm.
whatever the case may be, and you're not able to actually get to somebody, that could
Mhm.
potentially be an option.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's good to know, and like you said, I think that's really like you said, if there was one good thing that came out of COVID, that is, the being at home, working from home, doing therapy from home.
Well,
It's
and
become a lot
insurance
more
companies
accessible.
covering
Yeah. Yeah.
online
Yeah, that
therapy.
too. Yes.
That was not a thing so much before COVID.
No, not at all, not at all. So that is amazing. Sometimes I look down, and I'm sure a lot of us do, like, "Oh, technology's all bad," but there's so much good that comes out of it too that have benefit all of us, so.
And I would definitely say that that is one for being able to
Mhm.
bring in healing. And honestly, we have found, anecdotally that it does seem like for some people, being in the comfort of their own home
Mhm.
helps them, with
Yes.
regards to the reprocessing piece of it. So,
Yeah. That's what I
again,
was gonna
it's
say
just
as
like any
well.
other thing with therapy, it's very
Oh, yeah.
individualized.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think a lot of people would feel, or not everyone, as you said, but a lot of people would feel comfortable being in their home base, being at home, having their things around them that bring them comfort. So
Sure.
that is
Mhm.
another way to help them be more comfortable going and seeing somebody and working through their traumas.
Yes.
Well, that was all the questions I had on for EMDR for you. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about or bring up that we didn't discuss?
With regards to EMDR,
Or anything else? Anything other wisdom you'd like to share with us today?
I mean, and I think the most important thing, with any therapy, whether you go and you
Mhm.
do EMDR, or you're doing couples therapy or individual therapy, or bringing your child in for play therapy, the relationship that you have with your therapist is very important.
Mhm.
And you need to make sure that you are comfortable with your therapist.
Yes.
I am not the therapist for everybody, and
Mhm.
that's okay. You know, Sometimes it's just a personality clash. Sometimes, I'm not everybody's cup of tea,
Mhm.
just the same as, some of my colleagues may not be these people's cup of tea,
Right,
you know?
exactly.
So I always encourage people, if the first therapist that you find isn't a fit,
Mhm.
go try to find another one or
Yeah.
talk to your therapist about it. Say, hey, do you have referrals? Trust me,
Mhm.
it will not hurt our feelings. Okay. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
We are very comfortable with referring people out, to colleagues. And we have people
Mhm.
yet we're like, hey, this person might be a good fit or,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, I
So
think
don't,
that is very important, yeah.
yes, don't ever hesitate to, or if your therapist does something that you don't like,
Mhm.
bring it up in session to them and
Yeah.
say, hey, I don't understand this, or why did this happen, or I didn't like that, because I will often ask people when they come in if they've been in therapy before, you know, I don't want to reinvent the wheel here.
Mhm.
If your past therapist did something and you're like, that was no,
Yeah.
why would I force it on you again? You know,
Exactly. Mhm.
and I will say too, just like regular therapy, EMDR is always 100% under your control.
Mhm.
Okay. You come in and you say, God, I've got a headache today. I don't think I want to do EMDR. We don't do EMDR. You
Mhm.
come in and you say, oh, I really had a bad day at work. We don't do EMDR.
Mhm.
You are in the middle of reprocessing and you're like, okay, I need to stop. We stop.
Mhm.
You come in and you say, I don't ever want to do EMDR again. Well, we're probably going to talk about it. But at the end of the day, it is your decision and it
Mhm.
is within your control. And
Yeah.
that's super important because the last thing that I want to do is re-victimize you.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Everything you just said is so important. I think a lot of us think like you try a therapist, you're stuck with them. You like you said, you're kind of scared to hurt their feelings. Like I don't, we're not meshing, but it's
Nope.
almost like a friendship or relationship. You have to make sure you vibe with that person so you're fully comfortable to open up and be able to share with them. Yes, that is so important. So thank you so much for adding that little bit. I think a lot of people needed to hear that.
And the other thing that I will say too, I mean, I've been doing this for a while. There are, there's very little that you can tell, not only me, but almost any therapist,
Mhm.
that we probably haven't heard before,
Mhm.
if not multiple times,
Right.
you know? And that's just the whole point of it. It's people, why do I want to go talk to a stranger about my problems?
Mhm.
Well, I'm not involved in your everyday life. You know,
Mhm.
there's a
Mhm.
reason why I don't treat my siblings. There's a reason why I don't
Mhm.
treat friends.
Mhm.
Um, being that we're in a pretty rural small town area, I can't avoid treating people that live in the same,
Right.
place
Yeah.
as me, obviously. But, we very, I make sure people know, hey, you might see
Mhm.
me bebopping around town, I'm like usually looking pretty homeless, but you know, but you can feel free to ignore me. And I
Right, yeah.
I I can't even acknowledge you unless
Mhm.
you acknowledge
Right.
me first. That's
Mhm.
how seriously we take the confidentiality thing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's important too.
yeah, so, and that's like I said, it's the pros and cons of living in a more rural area. Um,
Absolutely.
so
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. I think it's very insightful. I think it shows people that there are other options out there. That's something I have been doing with this podcast. I've had a lot of different types of therapy come on. I've had art healing therapists come on, people to specialize in somatic therapy. Now
mhm,
we're talking on EMDR therapy. There's not just one set cookie cutter way to
no,
handle things, and
mhm,
everybody processes differently. It's important to explore the different options, especially if you're not having success, doing typical talk therapy or any other type of therapy. There's other options out there for you. So that's great that we're kind of
absolutely.
shedding some light on that. So thank you so much for that.
Mhm.
Before we end today, we'll do some fun questions just to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. So,
Okay.
coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee.
Yeah. Morning person or don't talk to me yet person?
Don't talk to me yet.
No.
Usually because I haven't had said coffee.
Right, exactly. Favorite comfort show?
Oh, favorite comfort show. Hmm. That's a hard one because I don't watch much TV or any really for that matter.
Mhm.
Um, but if I had to choose, I would probably go back to, huh, trying to think of TV shows I did used to watch. Um, maybe Scrubs?
Oh, nice. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd probably be what
Yeah.
I would go with.
That's a good one. It's funny and it is, got medical stuff in it. That's a great show. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, let's see here. Something that instantly makes you laugh.
Um, my kids are pretty darn funny, I
I
would have
bet.
to say.
Yeah.
Um,
Kids always make us laugh. Kids and animals, I think, are the top answers for that
oh,
one.
for sure, yeah.
Beach or mountains?
Beach.
Beach. What is the most underrated self-care activity?
Probably the self-care activities that aren't necessarily pleasurable.
Okay.
Things like, calling the debt collector,
Mm,
scheduling your colonoscopy,
mhm.
those kind of things. Really taking care of some of those the more mental or, the physical aspects that people tend to put off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important. That's a great answer. I think a lot of us do that, and, once you get it done, it's such a relief, and that's something that's no
Well,
longer, in
exactly.
your yeah, something
No.
that's no longer causing you that trauma or issue, so
Yeah, well, the anticipation is often far worse than the event, so
absolutely, absolutely. 9 times out of 10. I work in customer service. I've been in customer service for over 20 years, but still making that phone call to a customer, it's still I don't know, I
Right.
talk to people all day long, but just that making you hope sometimes they don't answer, you're like, "Okay, okay." But that's I don't know why we all think like that, so.
I know.
One small thing that brings you joy lately.
One small thing that brings me joy. Honestly, I have been doing a lot of purging in my house.
Oh, nice,
Going
yeah.
through stuff, getting rid of stuff, reorganizing, cleaning things out, that sort of thing. Um, so that actually has been I would say that's probably my number 2 self-care activity at this point.
Yes.
Just getting rid of some of just the clutter,
Yeah, that's
you
actually like
know?
a therapy in itself, I agree. Getting rid
Mhm.
of that clutter, doing a deep clean, I'm big on ever since I was a child, I was one of those kids that rearrange my bedroom every couple of weeks, bring my parents in to show 'em. I
Yep.
still get in that mood, and it just brings a sense of relief, you're more organized, I think it helps with the chaos in the mind as well, so
Agreed, yes.
absolutely. Well, Laura, thank you so much for being here and for explaining EMDR in a way that feels safe, honest, and actually understandable. If you're listening and this episode stirred up feelings, that's okay. Take a breath. Healing isn't linear, and your curiosity is often the first step. I'll have Laura's information and resources linked in the show notes. As always, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and be gentle with yourself after listening. This has been Auntie Mel Mel Life Unfiltered. You are not broken. Your brain and body are doing their best to protect you. Until next time, friends, bye.
Bye.
All right, friends, that's a wrap on today's episode of Auntie Mel Mel Life Unfiltered. Thank you for spending this time with me and stepping into the real, the raw, the messy, and the magical, because you know we don't do surface level here. If this episode hit home, made you laugh, or helped you feel a little less alone, go ahead and follow the podcast and share it with someone who might need it too. And remember, you are never too much, never too little, and never alone on this wild ride. I'll meet you back here next time for more truth, more feels, and more unfiltered goodness. This is Auntie Mel Mel signing off. Stay real, stay kind, and stay unfiltered. Thanks for hanging out with me today. This is Auntie Mel Mel. If this episode made you laugh, think, or feel a little less alone, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Sharing it really helps this community grow. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and right here on YouTube. I'll see you in the next episode of Life Unfiltered.